It was a calm July night on the North Sea. The water lay still a mirror beneath the fading sky. Far offshore, the oil rig Piper Alpha shimmered like a floating city of steel and flame, a lonely fortress surrounded by endless dark waves. The wind whispered through metal beams, faint
we're losing
and distant.
cabin pressure.
Men
We
worked,
need to
laughed, and
descend now.
smoked their last cigarettes, unaware that within the hour, this quiet rig would become a tower of fire rising from the sea. Commissioned in 1976, Piper Alpha stood as the pride of Britain's offshore empire, a steel giant rising from the cold waters of the North Sea. Operated by Occidental Petroleum, she produced more than 300,000 barrels of oil a day, feeding a nation's hunger for energy and progress. To those who worked there, she was more than a rig. She was a living, breathing machine, every pump, every valve, every hiss of gas a heartbeat in the dark. But after more than a decade of upgrades and hurried modifications, that heartbeat had become uneven. Pipes overlapped in confusion, safety systems conflicted with one another. Pressure built silently behind metal walls, waiting for one small mistake. July 6, 1988. The night shift began as usual. Fluorescent lights flickered over men clocking and signing logbooks and sipping lukewarm coffee. A maintenance report lay half-finished, noting condensate pump be temporarily offline. It seemed routine, trivial even. But in a system fueled by pressure, there is no such thing as trivial. And before dawn broke, that single note in a maintenance log would ignite the deadliest offshore disaster in history. It's 9:45 p.m. on the North Sea. The night shift begins like any other. Men move through the humming corridors of Piper Alpha, boots clanging softly against the steel floor. The air smells of oil, salt, and fatigue. In the control room, tired hands sign logbooks. A half-finished report lies open, one line scrawled in haste: condensate pump be temporarily offline. To keep production steady, the standby unit pump is switched on. A simple routine task, nothing unusual. But what the crew doesn't know is that pump as safety valve was removed earlier that day. In its place, a thin metal plate meant only for a few hours now stands between safety and disaster. Pressure begins to rise. At first, it's barely noticeable. A faint vibration underfoot. The steady rhythm of the machine growing uneven. A gauge needle trembles, flicks, steadies again. Somewhere deep in the module, gas slips through a tiny opening, invisible, silent. A hiss cuts through the noise. One worker pauses, frowns into the dark, then shrugs. On a rig like this, everything hisses, everything groans. He walks away. Inside the pump casing, pressure surges past the limit. The plate holding it back begins to bend, the metal whining under strain. No alarms, yet no flashing lights. Just the growing hum of something that should not be. 9:57 p.m. The plate snaps. A jet of high-pressure gas explodes into the air, roaring like a released dragon. Within seconds, vapor fills the room, colorless, odorless, deadly. It rolls across the deck like fog, thick and unseen, seeking ignition. In the control room, a red light blinks once, then dies. The automatic alarm never finishes its call. Gas reading on Module C, check it out, someone says over the radio comm routine. But the seconds are already gone. The gas drifts toward the generator room. A single spark no one ever knew from where leaps through the air. The world turns white. The first explosion shatters the night. Steel tears apart like paper. Fire engulfs the module, racing through vents and pipelines. Men are thrown from their seats, alarms scream, radios burst into static. On nearby rigs, workers look up to see an orange glow bloom on the horizon, a sun rising where there should be only sea and darkness. Explosion on Piper Alpha, we have lost contact. Inside, chaos. Doors twisted shut, corridors collapsing, smoke filling every breath. Those still standing stumble toward the lifeboats, but the fire has already cut them off. In less than 3 minutes, the pride of the North Sea becomes an inferno. A single oversight, a missing note, a forgotten warning, that's all it took. Now the monster they built to harvest fire has turned against them, roaring louder than the sea itself. "10:04 p.m., the ocean flashes white. A thunderclap rolls across the North Sea. Piper Alpha erupts. The explosion rips through the control room, walls vanish in a flash of light, glass shatters like ice. Men are thrown across consoles before they even understand what has happened. In an instant, everything turns to fire. Flames burst upward 200 feet high, painting the night sky orange. Metal bends and screams. The decks twist open like the ribs of a wounded beast. The radio goes silent. The alarms fail. The power dies. Those still alive stumble through corridors they can no longer recognize. Smoke so thick it blinds, heat so fierce it sears skin through clothing. Voices echo through the darkness, "This way, follow me." Then another explosion swallows the sound. Some men crawl toward the lifeboats only to find them melted, burned away before they ever touch the water. Others climb onto the upper decks where the air is thin and burning oil rains from above. The sea below glows red on fire with the very fuel that once gave them life. One worker stands at the edge staring down into the black water. The heat behind him is unbearable. He hesitates only a second, then jumps. His body cuts through the flames, vanishing into the freezing dark. All around the rig groans, splitting apart. Pipelines feeding in from distant platforms continue to pump gas, feeding the inferno. The sound is deafening, a roaring living creature made of flame and metal. From miles away, rescue ships pick up faint sonar pings, desperate signals lost beneath the crackle of burning oil. Helicopters hover, unable to get close, the heat too intense, even hundreds of meters above. And then silence. The fire consumes its own voice. The sea glows like molten glass, reflecting a sky filled with smoke and ash. In that moment, the mighty Piper Alpha, once the pride of the North Sea, becomes a floating tomb, a monument of fire built by man and reclaimed by the sea.
Mayday, mayday, we have an explosion. Requesting immediate assistance.
When the first rescue helicopters reached Piper Alpha, the crew thought their instruments were wrong. Where the rig should have stood a familiar beacon in the dark, there was only fire. The structure that once gleamed silver now glowed red and black, twisting in on itself like molten bone. The sea below was burning. Sheets of oil, thick and dark, rolled on waves of fire. The pilots circled helplessly, watching flames rise higher than their rotors could climb. Every attempt to descend was beaten back by heat and smoke. The radios were filled with broken voices, some screaming for help, others too faint to understand. But as the minutes passed, even those voices faded. On the decks below, survivors clung to what little remained. Men dove blindly into the sea, desperate to escape the inferno. Some hit burning oil, others vanished into the waves. Those who made it through the fire found themselves fighting a new enemy, the freezing black of the North Sea. The water was near 0 degrees. Many never resurfaced. Out on the horizon, ships and rigs stood frozen in shock. They could do nothing but watch. Helicopter spotlights cut through the smoke, illuminating floating debris, lifebelts, twisted ladders, and drifting bodies. The air reeked of fuel and salt, and something that felt like sorrow itself. At 3:00 a.m., the main tower collapsed, a roar that echoed across the ocean like thunder. The fire still burned, fed by pipelines that refused to die. For hours, the sea carried the glow of orange light, a flickering heartbeat in the darkness. When dawn finally broke, it revealed the full horror. The sky was pale, the water calm, but the rig was gone, reduced to a skeleton of steel jutting from the sea. Black smoke stretched upward like a morning veil. Helicopters hovered quietly, their engines muffled, as if even the machines understood the need for silence. Of the 226 men who had worked aboard Piper Alpha, only 61 survived. Some were rescued from the water. Others were found days later floating far from the site. The rest were never recovered. Families waited along the harbors and helipads, clutching photographs and prayers. Every helicopter that landed brought both hope and heartbreak. Divers later described the wreck as a graveyard. Charred metal, empty boots, burned helmets. They found watches still ticking under layers of ash. Time had continued even after the men were gone. The flames finally died 2 days later. Only then did the sea return to silence, a silence so heavy it seemed alive, as if the ocean itself mourned what it had consumed. When the smoke lifted, what remained was not just wreckage, but a warning written in fire and steel. A reminder of how quickly power can turn to fragility, and how the cost of one mistake can echo for generations. At sunrise, the horizon shimmered with gold light reflecting off the oil-slick water. The wind was calm, the waves gentle, as if the North Sea was pretending nothing had happened. But beneath that surface, it still carried the memory of every cry, every flame, every life that vanished that night. Piper Alpha was gone, but her story would never be forgotten. In the months that followed, investigators searched through twisted steel and fragments of memory, trying to understand how a fortress of iron could fall so quickly. The Cullen inquiry revealed what many had feared: not a single failure, but a chain of them. A system where deadlines spoke louder than safety, where silence in a logbook meant more than the lives it could cost. From those ashes came change. New regulations reshaped the oil industry, stricter safety codes, emergency drills, communication reforms. Every platform built afterward carried the lessons written in Piper Alpha's fire. Her tragedy became a blueprint for survival, but rules could not fill the empty chairs at dinner tables or the quiet spaces left in photographs. For the families, the sea never returned what it took. Some waited for years, still hoping the waves might bring something back: a keepsake, a nameplate, anything. Today, the North Sea is calm again. The rigs that replaced her rise against the horizon, shining under the pale northern light. At Aberdeen's memorial, 167 names are carved into stone, each one a reminder that progress was paid for in human lives. White flowers drift on the tide below, their petals trembling in the wind. The fire is gone, but its light remains. A warning, a promise, and a quiet echo that whispers through every rig that still stands above those cold, unforgiving waters. If one spark could end 100 lives, what would it take to awaken the world's conscience? The flames of Piper Alpha have long faded, but their echo still drifts across the sea, a reminder that safety is written in sacrifice, and that every life lost deserves to be remembered. Honor their story, keep their memory alive. Like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more untold stories from the deep.